Well, good day to you. It is October the 28th. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs and just point out if you are new, remind you again if you are hearing these videos before, that if you want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, you want to see if there's any truth to this information for yourself, the best thing to do is read more about it. And the easiest way to do that is to check out some of the websites that I provided links for in the description portion of every one of these videos. If you want to know which video to try, or which website to look at first, I would definitely check out the Share International site first. A link is in the description. If you want to come back and join the discussion, you're always welcome to do that by posting comments. Let me know what you think about what I had to say in this video. You can post questions in the comment section and I'll try to answer it in the next video, or you can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com, which leads me to my first question, because I had a bunch of different questions and a bunch of different comments that I wanted to discuss in this video, so it's going to be a very eclectic video. All right, now at Khang Kong Studio 5359, I'm not going to go into what you had initially asked, because I don't know if you're being silly or if you're being serious. But I will try to answer, I can very easily answer your last question. Can I talk with you privately? Yes, everyone's invited to do that. And the only way to do that is to email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. So at Khang Kong Studio, 5359. That's the only way to do it, searchforsigns@mail.com, and that goes for not only you, but everybody else. All right. Let's see. Oh, and then I was going to say too, if you do want to talk to me privately like that, just let me know. Please don't talk about this, on your show, and I won't, because I've had people email me before and they'd say, I'd rather you not, share what I have to say with your audience, and I'm cool with that. Other people say, yeah, sure, no problem. You can talk about it. I just didn't want to, write it all out in a comment post or something like that, which is fine too. So either way, whatever works. For you, I will do. Robert Vasquez said, the most reliable sign is in your heart. And that is so true. The heart never leads you astray. Just the question is are you listening to your heart? Are you listening to your emotions, which most people think is their heart, which is full of all sorts of illusion and glamour and destructiveness in its own way, right? And leads people astray that way. And also the mind is the same way. All right, now at Jaime 273, and if memory serves me, which it doesn't always serve me correctly, Jaime has commented before. I, for one, can't wait for the UN's trained stooges to come. Oh yeah, Jaime has definitely commented before now that I've read this. Should be quite hilarious to hear the blankety blank they have to say. Well, hopefully you'll find it funny, I guess. I don't know. But if memory serves me, this person, Jaime, if you're listening to this, every time you've commented, I know it's always been negative and against what I had to say. But like so many people who are in that position where they like to post contrary comments, which I'm totally cool with, they oftentimes will throw in a word or two that gets me thinking that I want to talk about something in relation to this information. And guess what? You did it again. UN. I wanted to talk about the UN, okay? Because I forget to talk about the UN, and it's a very important piece to all this information. Now, the United Nations has gotten a lot of bad press here, especially here in the United States, which I don't understand why. A lot of the people in my life that I've talked to about the United Nations have a very contrary view to what the United Nations really is. And there's a lot of fear and propaganda promoting that fear here in the United States. I don't know about other countries, but I'm just speaking from an American's point of view. Now, according to the masters, the fear that people have about the United Nations taking over the world, being a part of one world government with the Illuminati at its head and those kind of things, is BS, for lack of a better word. And so, or as he put it, retarded shit. Those are Jaime's words. Those aren't my words. I'm just putting it into this. And so, in reality, the UN will be the hope for mankind. And it will be the hope for mankind because it will eventually be the arbiter for peace in the world. It already is to some degree functional, but it's not functioning at full capacity for sure. But, at the very least, it's giving nations an opportunity to hear other nations' grievances. Whether they do anything about it right now is a whole other matter. But because the United Nations is set up with the Security Council, where countries like the United States, Britain, France, Russia, China, there's some other nations that are permanent members of the Security Council. Any one of those members can veto whatever agenda they want to talk about, if it doesn't suit their country personally, which basically gives the United Nations no teeth, because how many nations are going to agree upon the same thing, right? So that needs to be abolished, and eventually, according to the masters, it will be agreed upon to abolish the Security Council and just have one nation, one vote. So it wouldn't matter how rich the nation is, how poor the nation is, how influential the nation is or not, they will all have their own one voice to give and one vote to give on an issue, which will level the playing field for obvious reasons. Now, in the future, the reason why the masters are saying that the United Nations is the hope for mankind and the arbiter of peace for mankind is because the most obvious is it will give nations the ability to resolve their conflicts peacefully through discussion and debate. Okay. The second, it will help nations start to understand the needs of other nations, of course, right? Because they'll be sitting across the proverbial table from them, so they can hear what they have to say and hear their grievances in that way, and not tune them out, right? The other one, the two less obvious. Okay, one, one of the less obvious ones is nations such as the United States and China and Russia and some other European nations and so forth are the biggest violators of arms trafficking, because they're making billions of dollars off of that immoral trade. And the United Nations, if given half a chance, would be able to stop that. So anytime you watch the news and you hear about a country that you don't even care to even hear about because it's so poor and so unknown, but you hear about a conflict in that nation, or even other nations like Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, those kind of things, they're all getting their guns from somewhere. And they're usually getting them from Russia, China, United States, Britain, France, Germany, Australia, those kind of things. And if those trades could stop, it would limit a lot of those skirmishes, because, as Maitreya said, there is always the seed, the possibility of total annihilation, human annihilation, and in that way, by just even a little skirmish between groups of people. So there's this tiny little nation out of the way that most people don't even think about because they're so poor. There's this tiny little skirmish between two groups of people from various ideologies or economic classes or whatever. And they get their guns from a richer nation like the United States. That conflict could eventually escalate to where more and more nations are involved, to where eventually all the nations are involved and nuclear weapons are used, and will end this experiment called Earth forever. So that's why it's so imperative that we stop the arms trade. So the United Nations could do that. And then the second less obvious reason is because of the principle of sharing. The principle of sharing, according to the masters, is the only way to bring about trust amongst the nations. That's it. There is no other way. And it's so necessary because our very future depends on whether we do create peace or not. It's not a pie in the sky ideal, and it's not something that we should just be wishing for. We should be working toward it in real life, in reality. And it's very simple according to the masters. According to what Maitreya says, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. That's it. That's how it works. And there's no second way to do this. There's no alternative to do this. This is the only way to do it. It's through the principle of sharing. So the United Nations would fit into that because, according to the masters, they would eventually help humanity create an agency within the United Nations that would bring about the principle of sharing, but also sustain and maintain it. Because nations would eventually give an inventory of what they have to the United Nations. This is what I have in excess. This is what I need. Every nation has an excess, no matter how rich or how poor it is. Every nation has a need that another nation has in excess of, without exception. So right now, the way a nation gets those resources that it wants typically is it exploits that other nation, whether militarily or economically. And that's how they get what they want from that nation. And that's why the nations around the world don't trust one another. That's why they're in competition with one another. That's why they have a tendency to lash out violently toward one another, is because they're being exploited in that way. But the principle of sharing would end all that overnight, really. And it would start to bring about goodwill amongst the nations. And I always say this when I talk about the principle of sharing. Look historically at the Marshall Plan, because according to the masters, it was the only time that the principle of sharing ever took place. The nations that were once at war tried the principle of sharing. They called it the Marshall Plan. It happened for just a little bit of time. But none of those nations have attacked one another since. All those nations that participated in the Marshall Plan have goodwill amongst between those nations and so forth. So if it could just be tried amongst nations that hate each other now, what would happen? It would bring about the same result. It would bring about a limited amount of trust amongst those nations, a little bit of goodwill, eventually bring about peace and total trust, and eventually manifested love amongst those nations. But it won't begin to happen until we try the principle of sharing. That's where the United Nations fit in. It would be so much easier to have one, center of the wheel kind of thing that would be bringing the goods in and taking it and shipping it out. We already have the capacity to do this. We just don't have the political will to do it. But peace will only come when nations learn to share. And that's where the United Nations fit in. But thank you, Jaime, for the sarcastic comment. And I am fluent in sarcasm, so I know you're being sarcastic with me, but it doesn't mean I can't turn it and talk about something useful. And on some level, I deserve sarcasm because that's my karma for being sarcastic myself. But anyway, I really do appreciate it nonetheless. And if it was you who commented before, thank you for coming back and commenting again for sure. All right, so there's a reason why I changed the background of this video, and that's coming from Lauren R3276, and I tried to answer it in the last video, but I just ran out of time. I've prayed to Maitreya for some time now, but I haven't really gotten any response. I will keep doing it, however. Hopefully I will receive help in the near future. And you're kind of vague in your comments, so I can only comment in response to what you're saying, but it might not be exactly what you're saying to me, Lauren. So if you're listening to this, please forgive me if I'm not answering or addressing your comment the way that you perhaps are wanting me to address it, or even if you do, you might not even be wanting me to address it. You might just be commenting per se. But anyway, this image here, according to Benjamin Creme, was drawn by Maitreya. And it says, be at peace, remember to pray. So don't stop praying. And this goes for everybody. And I first saw this in Share International magazine because it was published in there, but it was posted on the missing relative board. It has a sad origin to this little whimsical sketch that he wrote, but so true, being a whimsical sketch nonetheless. But anyway, he posted it on the missing relatives board in Malaysia after they had that tsunami in the Christmas, I think it was in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Please don't bite my head off if that's the wrong year. I didn't take the time to go back and look at the exact date of when it happened and so forth, but it was awful because so many people died from this tsunami. But people were, of course, posting pictures of their relatives that were missing. They were assumed, of course, dead, and Maitreya posted it on there to give people some hope and to pray. So keep praying. Now, if you haven't done this already, Lauren, and I don't know if you have or not, Maitreya has said before that the best way to connect with him is by looking at the image of the hand of Maitreya. If you don't have this image, go to the Share International site. There's a whole page devoted to it, and it talks about how it came about and what does it mean for humanity and so forth. It's quite an extraordinary miracle because you don't have to travel to Barcelona to see the actual hand of Maitreya. You just look at an image of it. And so by looking at it, according to Maitreya himself, it's the best way that any one of us can, and the closest that he can get to any one of us until he's out and known for who he is in the world. Right now he's out and known in the world, but nobody knows who he is because he's not using the name Maitreya. But when he's out known for who he is, and we all know he's Maitreya after the Day of Declaration, of course we'll have a closer relationship with him. But until now, this is as close as he can get. But he says his help is there. All we have to do is ask. Now, you know, I'm not an authority on how to pray. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to sit here and say that I know how to do it and somebody else doesn't. But one way to pray to Maitreya is to be very specific. In fact, actually, Benjamin Creme has encouraged people to be very specific in praying to Maitreya and not vague, because he doesn't know exactly how to respond and answer a prayer that's vague. And I've noticed that the more specific I am with the prayer, the better it is. Now, the other thing is maybe to check motives, you know, in how you pray. I know when my motives are off, whether it's because I'm selfish or I'm wanting to test Maitreya or something like that, it doesn't work. So if it's sincere and you're praying and you're at peace, then it will manifest in some level. It might not manifest right this second. It might not be this week. It might come. You know, I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there to you for you to think about. But I really do appreciate your comment. It tugged at my heartstrings when I read it. But the other thing too is that, you know, Maitreya has always said he always helps as much as he can, and any one of us, when we ask for his help. But also, we might not recognize the way it comes and manifests. So sometimes it's very direct and sometimes it's very indirect. But keep doing what, you know, you said it yourself. Just keep doing it. So hopefully that will help. Like I said, this is an eclectic video. I got something that's... I got another couple questions that are totally different. You said there is a master in New York, LA, and San Francisco. Do you know their names? No, I do not. Are there any others? Yes, there are. Will there be more? Yes, there will be. And so the masters lived in isolation for over 100,000 years. That's why there is little to no information about these masters, about their priorities. You know, and there wasn't any information about the masters until Helena Blavatsky came on the scene in 1875 and started publishing books and talking to groups of people about the masters. Of course, she was maligned and discredited and all sorts of nonsense, but she was speaking the truth about the masters. But nobody had ever heard about them. And then there's all this distortion that comes out about the masters from those people who are devoted to the masters for some reason, those people who think they're the absolute worst for humanity. But neither are true. But what is the truth about the masters? If you want to know the truth about the masters, read Alice Bailey, read Benjamin Creme. I would say read Benjamin Creme's books first to get the best and simplest, you know, idea about what these masters are. And then branch out and read Helena Blavatsky if you want. But, you know, those are the three that I would recommend reading, you know. But Benjamin Creme started speaking about the masters actually coming back into the everyday world. Now, Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey both talked about it, but they talked about it happening in the future at some point. Benjamin Creme was saying that it already had happened. Now, the way that these masters work, they don't just come out there and say they're masters. So anybody right now who's claiming to be a master, claiming to be the Christ, or claiming to be the Messiah is not Maitreya, is not one of these masters at all. They don't talk like that. You know what I'm saying? They will, the times that I saw Maitreya, he never once said that he was Maitreya. I had to recognize him as Maitreya. Now, well, eventually he will be introduced as that, but that's a ways down the road. But these masters lived in seclusion for over 100,000 years. Like I said, that's why they were forgotten about. But there was a time when they were out known for who they were in the world. Eventually, they will be out known for who they are in the world. But right now, we're kind of in this transitional phase of them coming back. So the first one, according to Benjamin Creme, left his ancient retreat and went into New York. And then the second one, apart from Maitreya, went into London. Maitreya also lives in London, but this one came into London. Then went into Geneva, one into Darjeeling, and one into Tokyo. And then two more followed, one into Rome and one into Moscow. The master in Rome, according to Benjamin Creme, is the master who was Jesus, known as the Master Jesus in esoteric circles. Not looked to as the only true Son of God, as evangelical Christians and most Christians have this mystical view of who and what Jesus is, but have a much more accurate view of who Jesus is and what Jesus really means for humanity than perhaps the evangelical Christians do. But be that as it may, they're both thinking of the same individual kind of in their own way. But anyway, and then more followed. One went into L.A., one went into the outskirts of San Francisco. The other master in the United States that Ben had mentioned, and the only other one that he mentioned, lives in Arkansas, actually in the Ozark Mountains. Now, what their purpose and their function is, I don't know. And others other masters have gone into other major cities like Paris and Beijing, I think is the other ones that I know of off the top of my head. But none of these masters are known for who they are. There are probably some people in those cities who know who they are, but they're not talking about them for very specific reasons, because none of these masters will be introduced as a master, will come out into the everyday world before Maitreya does. Maitreya will declare himself on the day of declaration after there's this crescendo of interest in who and what he is, what his priorities are. Humanity is starting to respond to those priorities in a way and so forth, to where he will be able to speak directly to humanity through our media. And we will all hear at the same time that he is Maitreya. Now, in the last video, I talked about the conflict in Palestine and Israel. Just as what was going on in Ukraine, just as some of the injustices here in the United States and so forth that people march for. But the people, according to Maitreya, are the hope for mankind. We are the hope for mankind. It's the voice of the people that's the hope for mankind, as much as Maitreya and these masters are. They are only here to assist and guide and help. That's it. We have to do the work. But the thing that gives me so much hope now, with not seeing Maitreya and recognizing him on TV, not seeing any political leader on the political scene that is a true leader, like an Abraham Lincoln or an FDR or even a JFK or anybody, or Winston Churchill or anybody like that. They seems to be devoid of any of those kind of politicians, right? The voice of the people are being heard more and more and more. And it's coming in really weird ways. It's uncommon ways, not weird ways, but uncommon ways. Weird implies not normal, I guess, because it should be normal that we are speaking out against the injustices of our own government for what they do. But people are putting aside their fear of being harmed, being arrested and imprisoned for a long time, or even being killed, and speaking out against their injustices that their government is perpetrating on their people. It's happening in Iran, it's happening in Russia, it's happening in Israel, it's happening in the United States, it's happening all over the world. And this is the sign that the teacher is ready, or humanity is ready to receive the teachings of Maitreya, I guess is a better way of saying it. And as hard as it is to see the violence that we perpetrate on each other, as hard as it is to see the injustices that we impose on other people and so forth, and the pain that it causes those people's families, whether it's us or somebody that we don't even know, and it still causes us pain. The hope is that the people are starting to rise like a contagion. It's starting to flow out into humanity to where people cannot sit back and do nothing anymore. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the hope for mankind. And this is all coming from the energies of Maitreya flowing in tremendous potency, opening the hearts of all mankind. But anyway, I love you guys, and I want to leave you with something that Maitreya said to me a long time ago. He said, "You will see me on TV real soon, and we're going to change the world together." I love you. Take care. You guys have a great day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.